Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of MeteoMark Weather. We got a lot to talk about. The tropics are going to be the big story. Could we have something forming? Our first tropical system in the Caribbean and eventually the Gulf. We're going to take a look at all the details and see which models are indicating some development over the next week or two. We could be talking about a lot of tropical moisture and maybe our first tropical storm. We'll also be talking about severe weather here in eastern North America, more coastal low action potentially, and a huge start to a heat wave across eastern North America as we stretch through this week. Some areas in the east, all the way up to the Ohio Valley in New England, could be reaching the 90s. Let's get into it. All right, everyone. So we're going to start off, obviously, with the tropics here. It starts out a little quiet with the exception around the edges here. Look at our intertropical convergence zone southeast of Trinidad, Tobago. Right now, it's looking a little quiet across the north central, northwestern Caribbean, but things are going to change. We have this frontal boundary just hanging out here south of Florida, the Bahamas, as we stretch into Monday and into Tuesday. We're going to watch this for some a little bit of tropical moisture, and that's going to help, hopefully try to start breaking the drought a little bit, especially in South Florida here in Central Florida, even into Northern Florida. We'll get some tropical moisture. Now, look at here. This is not what I'm interested in. This is just that boundary heading to the north, slowly drifting towards the northwest here. What's going to be forming over the next several days is down in this region here. Now, obviously, this is going to help the Eastern Pacific probably spin up another tropical storm, a second tropical storm of the season. We also have some tropical moisture spinning around this retreating subtropical high out here. So the trade winds are going to keep the steering currents in this general direction towards the west-northwest. Now, here we go, right around June 6th. This is where things start to get a little bit interesting. Right down here, we always have this positive signal showing up on the GFS that something may be brewing. We'll get into the European here in a couple minutes, but this is what the GFS is kind of indicating here. It's a little bit south and west each model run, I've noticed, over the last several days. So we're kind of trending with a stronger subtropical high. Even though it's retreating out here, we're having more of an influence in keeping this a little bit more suppressed to the south and west. And I think that will result in maybe a slightly weaker system as well. This model continues to blow this up into a hurricane, as I'll show you, but I'm thinking more of a tropical storm with any sort of development here. So June 7th, obviously, we're getting some development here into the Eastern Pacific, and that may affect the South Mexican coastline here. But we're going to continue to watch this system here into the Caribbean, the West Central Caribbean, June 8th. This is where I think we'll start to see this area of low pressure start to initialize here, just northeast of the Honduras coastline here. So here we go, 8 a.m. on June 8th, 11 a.m. You can see lots of deep tropical moisture, even though the circulation is way down here, just along the Central American coastline. Look at all this deep tropical moisture to the east of it, towards Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. You'll start to really get into some big tropical rain right around June 8th into the 9th here. You can see this pinwheeling towards the west-northwest and eventually the northwest here towards June 9th. You can see a lot of spiraling feeder bands on the east side of this. So obviously by June 9th, I think it's looking like the model trends are hinting at a tropical storm at this point, a minimal tropical storm, maybe developing even maybe a little bit into a moderate tropical storm by this point. You can see there's Georgetown here, the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, parts of the southern Bahamas, even the Florida Keys getting clipped. Now look at June 10th is where Cancun does start to get into some of these northern bands here on the northern side of this potential tropical system. So the GFS has been very persistent on keeping this positive signal that we're seeing here in the tropics. There it is, Cancun, a landfalling potential tropical storm right around June 10th in the afternoon here. But I want to make note of something here. Let me just zoom out. Look how big this circulation is. The GFS continues to show a really large circulation. This would get South Florida into some big tropical moisture, even though the center of circulation is on the northern coastline of the Yucatan here. So we've had in the last couple days, this was showing more of an East Coast run. Now we're kind of pinwheeling back towards the Gulf potential here. And as we go through June 11th into the 12th, you can see what's going to be happening here. Here's 2 p.m. on the 11th. It shows it reemerging here into the Gulf. So tremendous moisture, even on the east side of it here, all the way up the Florida coastline here and the Florida Peninsula. Still feeder bands moving through the Cayman Islands and even through Jamaica here. We'll get into those rainfall amounts momentarily here in a couple minutes. But here it is on June 12th. Yeah, we're starting to wobble the system more towards the west and northwest here as this high pressure does start to try to exert itself further towards the west here. This would deflect it away from Florida in the east coast, showing a stronger subtropical high here. Now, towards the end of the forecast period here, take this with a grain of salt because this far out, so much can change. We're out 276 hours here on this model run. You can see it is approaching the north central Gulf Coast, Louisiana in particular, as a hurricane. Not so sure I'm buying this becoming a hurricane at this point, but it's showing around a 980, 984 millibar low pressure here in the central part, and then making landfall in central and western parts of Louisiana. As this, it seems like this high will be building further west in time here. So this is what we're looking at, pushing this system more towards the north central Gulf. Still some deep tropical moisture moving across the western and central part of the Caribbean. But look at this, even in Dominican Republic, Haiti area, through the northeast Caribbean islands, it's looking like drier times as this high pressure really exerts its influence. But look at this. Even after a landfall, we're still showing deep tropical moisture across Cancun, all the way up to the north central and eastern Gulf Coast region here. Look at this. It's bringing it over towards the Texas-Louisiana line here on June 14th, with tropical moisture surging all the way up into the Carolinas and Virginia and Kentucky here. So this is something we'll have to keep an eye on. The steering currents become much weaker, and it pushes it into eastern Texas, towards Houston and Galveston area, and towards Beaumont, Port Arthur here. So this is a scenario that would be bad for a flooding type thing, but it's way too early to get into details of where this is going to make landfall. And I hate to say this, but look at behind it. There is another system that the GFS is kind of picking up on here, but it's a little too early to tell. All right, so we're looking at the European model here. Thanks to Tropical Tidbits for this analysis. So we're looking at the European, and we're propagating throughout the week. Now, you can see we have plenty of shower and thunder shower activity here across the central and the western Caribbean. Places like Honduras, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, down in through Trinidad, Tobago here. There's an endless supply, it seems, of tropical moisture. Now, look at this to the north. This is that boundary that we've been talking about. Got to watch this time of year as well. So let's actually see if we can get this next big tropical wave that the GFS is going crazy with to initialize. So as we head throughout the week, here's Tuesday, you start to see evidence of an area of low pressure along the coast of Colombia, South America here. So this is going to be probably the start of something, but look at this. This is now the Europeans going crazy with tropical moisture here across the western Caribbean, southeastern Gulf, and the western Atlantic. So this is something we need to keep a close watch on. It's indicating that there's going to be tremendous rainfall here, parts of Cayman Islands, all the way up through south and central Florida, the northern Bahamas, through Honduras, Belize, these areas. Now, we do get some scattered showers back through the northeastern Caribbean islands. We'll keep an eye on this as well, but there's no tropical feature associated with that. So that's the good news. Florida getting some real beneficial rains here through Wednesday, June 4th. Now look at this. The tropical moisture does start to pinwheel towards the west here on the European model. Still no signs of a low pressure system initializing. This disturbance here just to the west of this blocking high off the North Carolina coast. So we'll keep an eye on it here. It does look kind of interesting that we have this kind of pattern kicking in, but surges of moisture continuing throughout Central America. There's an area of low pressure around Belize, so we'll keep an eye on it. But we also have to watch this feature off the Carolinas and Florida coastline as we go through time. You see Friday, June 6th here. Now there's another area of low pressure coming off the Columbia coastline here. We'll continue to watch. Showers continuing on these tropical waves, those trade winds around this area of high pressure as it does start to retreat just southeast of Bermuda by this point on the European model. So we'll continue to watch it. Trinidad, Tobago here getting hit with lots of tropical surges of moisture. You can see the intertropical convergence zone right down in this area. Showers continuing across parts of Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, parts of Florida as well. Look at Central America, Honduras, Nicaragua, Belize, really socked in, but not so much around, Cancun by this time, Saturday, June 7th. Now, as we want to continue here on the European run through June 8th, you can see that stalled frontal boundary along the East Coast. We'll continue to watch. Here's another area of low pressure exiting into the South Central Caribbean here. The good news is still, it looks like so far the Europeans not getting anything out of this mess, at least through June 11th here. So that is the good news. Comparing that to the GFS, which continues to go crazy with our tropical wave. You can see the intertropical convergence zone bouncing a little bit further to the north here by June 12th. High pressure actually dominating right over the island of Hispaniola here. And we have to watch this stalled frontal boundary south of the Florida Keys through Cancun here. But look at this. This is what I wanted to show you on the European. We do start to see a big uptick. This may be the start of something here, at least on the European model, a big surge of moisture. We may have something either try to form Atlantic side or maybe even Eastern Pacific side here. This version of the model showing something forming on the Eastern Pacific side, but look at this out here. This is a massive tropical wave that will be approaching the southern and central Lesser Antilles, Trinidad, Tobago, all the way up to St. Vincent, these areas. We'll have to watch this because the Europeans showing the intertropical convergence zone bouncing much further to the north as we head through the middle of the month here. And look at that surge of tropical moisture continuing. Florida continued to get hit here with tropical moisture as well through parts of the northern Caribbean islands. Look at this. This looks really ominous. European model going with some sort of tropical wave trying to develop into something here, maybe a disturbance or even a depression/storm. So we'll keep an eye on it here. But look at this. Last frame, June 16th here of the European model. Look at this big mess across the Northwest Caribbean and Central America. That's another thing we'll have to keep a close watch here on. And looking at the western, for much of the Western Atlantic here, we are looking at well above average of sea surface temperature analysis. The Gulf, Northwest Caribbean in particular, and the Western Atlantic running well above average, about 2 to 3 degrees in some of these areas. But I want to make note, look what the Saharan dust is doing out here by the Cape Verde Islands, all the way just east of the Lesser Antilles. It's keeping those sea surface temperatures down about a degree or two, which is some great news heading into hurricane season. All right, so let's take a look at the GFS model. This is the one that's initializing our tropical system. We'll take it through June 6th here. You can see a lot of moisture bottled up from Cancun to western Cuba, the north central part of Bahamas. We're looking in excess of close to 100 plus millimeters here, also down in through Honduras, Central America, Belize. But watch this as we head into the following week with our potential tropical system. Look at this surge of tropical moisture. Yeah, some areas in the Cayman Islands, upwards of 250 millimeters of rain. Jamaica, you're going to be close here, right on the edge. Eastern Jamaica could see upwards of 300 millimeters. North coast of Honduras, 200 to 300 millimeters into eastern part of Belize. Cancun, yeah, it's going to be close, 100 to 200 millimeters here. So we're talking about 3 to 6 inches. And then towards the Cayman Islands, maybe 8 close to 10 inches in some of these areas. Look at eastern Jamaica, 350 millimeters. We're getting up towards, 6 to 8 inches here. This is some dangerous rainfall totals here. So we're going to see some potential flooding with this system. Even if this system doesn't develop, we're looking at a lot of tropical moisture associated with this, even into South Florida and the Bahamas as well. All right, so looking at the tropical moisture outlook for this week across the Western Caribbean. Yeah, Northwest Caribbean to South Florida, about northern Bahamas, especially just north of the Cayman Islands, Cancun. Look at these areas getting hit through Thursday. Lots of rain here, upwards of 60 millimeters plus. South Florida and the Keys, northern Bahamas, in excess of 125 millimeters here. But then it's June 9th, June 10th. Here we go. So the European model still, even though it's not initializing an official area of low pressure here, surges of moisture continue. Look through parts of Honduras here in Belize. You're getting upwards of 300, 400 millimeters of rain in some areas. A little bit lesser here in Honduras. Some of these areas along the north coast actually getting less. That's some good news. But here's Jamaica. You see the eastern tip near Portland Parish, upwards of 100 to 130 millimeters here. Cayman Islands, you're averaging out a little bit less on this model run. That's some good news. About 60, 70 millimeters. And the Dominican Republic over here, yeah, north part, you got a rain hole here, but look at averaging out to 45 to 60 millimeters on average here. And as we look into the Eastern Caribbean with our GFS model, here it is. we're looking at a little tropical wave moving through mid to late week, the second full week here of June. And then look at this. Yeah, so we're looking at rainfall amounts close to a 2-week period. Dominican Republic, 60 to somewhere close to 100 millimeters in some of these areas, especially in eastern and central parts of Dominican Republic here. Eastern part of Puerto Rico, upwards of 100, 125 millimeters. So some of these areas could get upwards of 3 to 4 inches. And then as we're getting down in through the Lesser Antilles, Central Lesser Antilles, with those trade winds, we could be getting 70 to close to 100 millimeters. Trinidad, Tobago, the intertropical convergence zone is going to be pinwheeling further north here. We could see a big tropical moisture surge towards 100 to 125 millimeters. And cruise into the Eastern Caribbean here on our European run. So this week's pretty dry all the way through next weekend, exception for a little bit of tropical wave action here through Trinidad Tobago area. If I can get my pencil to work, there we go. And then through Central Lesser Antilles here. Parts of Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, 30 to 50 millimeters on average here. Nothing more than a quarter to a half an inch on average. But look at, Trinidad Tobago, this is where the tropical moisture really starts to kick in. And then we just surge it. Look at this. All the way through June 16th, we really start to get that hint that the European model is going crazy with a tropical wave coming right out of the intertropical convergence zone here. All right, so looking at our future radar here, picking up Sunday evening, you can see we have some isolated showers and thunderstorms here across the I-81 corridor, northeast, western Catskills, Poconos, Hudson Valley region. I know you don't need more rain after what happened the last couple days, but here it is. A few scattered showers, nothing tremendously heavy. Look at this as we head through 10 p.m. Some shower and thunderstorms bubbling up here into eastern North Carolina. Watch out. Some of these could be a little strong here. A few isolated severe as these approach the Outer Banks through midnight and 1 a.m. And then look at across the south here. Look at Florida. We're going to start to fill this in. This is 10 a.m. on Monday morning. Look at this. This is a lot of deep tropical moisture, and we're going to be dealing with this for quite some time across Florida. We could be looking at about a week and a half of rain, close to 5 to 7 inches, especially across South and Central Florida here. But look at this, June 3rd, 1 a.m., we're really socked in with a lot of rainfall here through parts of South Florida and the Bahamas. Now, let's just back this up a second. As we get into, look at this, look how quickly these fire on June 2nd here, Monday evening. Look at this squall line just forming across the Great Plains into parts of Oklahoma as well. We're going to be watching for a lot of severe weather development as we head through 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning, June 3rd. But you can see what's in control of the East Coast here, especially the central and northern East Coast, up into the northeast, Ohio Valley, a big area of high pressure. Severe weather across the country here for your Sunday afternoon and evening. We're looking at a slight risk of severe thunderstorms from Dallas down to Houston, Austin area, and then a marginal risk in these darker green areas, North Carolina and eastern Tennessee. As we look to Monday, that attention turns towards the plains here. Slight risk here into the central and western plains. Florida, a generalized thunderstorm area, marginal risk throughout parts of much of the plains and the northern Midwest. And as we look towards Tuesday, that big threat moves to the east here, a large area from Dallas-Fort Worth all the way up to just west of Milwaukee, Wisconsin here, and Chicago getting into the marginal risk here. A slight to almost non-existent risk here along the Gulf Coast. These will be more generalized gully washer tropical thunderstorms here across much of Florida all the way to South Texas. All right, so picking up where our future radar left off for the GFS model, you can see most of the tropical activity for moisture is going to be across South Florida here, the Bahamas, and look at the severe weather starting to ensue across the plains. We're dealing with high pressure along the U.S. East Coast. We're going to start to set up that ring of fire. It's also showing up on the European model, which I'll show you momentarily, but look at that. There's that big old high to the east here. Got that tropical moisture here hung up across Florida and the Bahamas. And then as we continue to go out here in time, you can ultimately see what we're going to be looking at here. Lots of tropical moisture. What is this, by the way? It just seems to be some sort of tropical entity moisture just hanging out here off the U.S. East Coast. So that is pretty interesting here. We'll continue to watch it here as we go out in time, but it is going to be interesting for that matter. So let's just continue to move it here throughout the rest of your June first week of June, you can see, look it up here. I want to make note of this. Mesoscale convective systems will definitely be felt here across the Ohio Valley, eastern Great Lakes, and into the northeast here. So look at that. You start to see, there's our tropical system trying to initialize down in the Caribbean. And look at this, high pressure building into the Great Lakes and southeast Canada. That's going to keep the storminess here across the mid-Mississippi River Valley to the North Carolina coastline here. So it looks like stormier times are ahead at least for 4 or 5 days here across this region as this high pressure retreats to the east. And as you know, going into this week in June here, we're going to see that heat wave. So that's going to break as we head on into the second week. Obviously, it looks like we're going to see a little bit of pullback on those temperatures, but increased storminess here. Look at coming out. There's that big high. That's going to be steering whatever happens here in the Gulf. Now, all eyes are going to be on the Gulf at this point. As we continue to go out here in time, you can see that moving towards the Louisiana coastline and then moving up here. Look at the moisture. Depending on what happens, you can see the bend in these isobars. There's a kind of an inverted trough, kind of frontal boundary hanging out here. And whatever happens with this, we'll keep an eye on it here. This is June 13th. A lot can change, but there could be a lot of tropical moisture hanging out with this potential tropical system, tropical storm. Of course, the GFS showing a landfalling hurricane here, at least on this run in Louisiana. All right, so picking up where our future radar left off here, you can see what's going to be happening with the European model as we head throughout the rest of the week. You see this big area of high pressure along the U.S. East Coast. We're going to continue to watch this because look at this ring of fire around it. This is a big old subtropical high that's going to keep the heat blasting across eastern North America. Many temperatures will be approaching 90. And look at this. This area of low pressure, this frontal boundary does start to weaken as it tries to plow into this blocking high. Now, look at on the southwest corner of this high pressure. This is where we get these tropical wave type action. Lots of deep tropical moisture. We'll be going over those rainfall amounts momentarily. You do need the rain here in Florida, that's for sure. But look at this. By Thursday, we do start to fill in that ring of fire. We do get some thunderstorms on the north and northwest side of this that could actually be strong to severe from Illinois all the way up to Ohio and northwest Pennsylvania. So watch out. Could have a few mesoscale convective systems here. Unfortunately, I'm going to have my Canadian outlook several minutes from now in this video. This high pressure up here is not good news for these Canadian wildfires up here. Unfortunately, we're back to where we were about 2 years ago with these fires, which is terrible. The United States seems to be getting all of Canada's rain at this point. Now look at this. June 6th into the 7th, we do start to see a push of some moisture here, showers and thunderstorms that could be severe. We also have a tropical type entity here trying to pinwheel off the North Carolina coast. So we'll watch for tropical moisture here. But look at Saturday. You know it's the weekend in the Mid-Atlantic and the East Coast. You know what that means. It's time for some rain and thunderstorms, unfortunately. And this stalled area of low pressure seems to be the focal point. Maybe not an all-day rain, but some of those storms could be strong in some areas here. As we head on into Sunday, we do try to clear things out through much of the northeast mid-Atlantic area here, and we turn our attention to some strong to severe thunderstorms in the central Mississippi River Valley and up through parts of the upper Midwest here. So we'll watch for some strong thunderstorms developing here through June 9th. Look at June 10th here. This system does start to dive south here as we have this blocking high up here to the northeast. It's going to force systems either up and over or down to the southeast like this. And unfortunately, this system does form a big area of low pressure on Tuesday, June 10th, right along the spine of the Central Appalachians. And look what it does. I know some areas that just have seen way too much rain already are going to see more here. And this is pretty interesting because it does tap into some tropical moisture off the southeast coast and does form a coastal low here. So coastal lows are not over here. But look at this big area of severe weather out here in the northern plains, June 14th. More mesoscale convective type systems as we get another blocking ridge along with a ring of fire pattern developing on the north side through central. Look at this. Look at this big mesoscale convective system in Ohio, northwest Pennsylvania, southern Iowa here. Yeah, we're going to get some big time storms here, so watch out. And rainfall amounts here. So we head through midweek. It's actually a lot of dryness along the East Coast, unless you're up in northern New England. Look at Florida here. Upwards of 3 to as much as 5 inches of rain with that tropical moisture across South Florida, propagating up to Central Florida. Now, as we head throughout the next weekend, we do start to get into that rain in the Northeast, 1 to 2.5 inches on average. The northern Ohio Valley here getting into about 3/4 to 1.25 inches. But then we start to see right around Wednesday, June 11th, we tap into a lot of tropical moisture here along the U.S. East Coast and then up through the eastern Great Lakes into the Northeast to widespread 2 to 4 inch amounts here. And then as we stretch through the 15th into the 16th, look at this. This is getting a little dangerous up here into parts of the Ohio Valley, eastern and southeastern Great Lakes, into parts of the Northeast. Some areas could be seeing 4 to as much as 6 inches locally higher amounts. Look at Florida down in here. 6, 7, 8 inches, not out of the question. And taking a look at our GFS run here for precipitation this week. Yeah, the east, with the exception for Florida and coastal Carolinas here, looking dry. Look at that. Some areas across Florida could see upwards of 3 to 5 inches here on the GFS. And some tropical moisture up along the coastal Carolinas. We could get pretty close to 2 to 3 inches in some of these areas. Now watch this as we head into June 9th through about the 14th and 15th. You can see, there we go, GFS showing a landfalling tropical system along the north central Gulf Coast here. Some areas, look at this. This is bad. 9, 16 inches. And then look at this, widespread 2 to 5 inch totals here across much of eastern North America. But I just want to zoom in. It's too early to get into these kind of amounts, but if this system were to slow down and bend westward, these are the kind of rainfall totals we could be talking about. 16, 17 inches here, 20 inches. So yeah, let's hope the steering currents don't become this weak as the system gets away from the subtropical high, because there's no systems to the north during this time that can help move this out. So that's just this model run though. And before we continue with more weather coverage, don't forget, if you made it this far in the video and you like it, smash that like button, everyone. It really does help. Question or comment down below. I'd love to read your questions or comments. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe bell notification button so you're alerted with all my future weather video updates, especially ahead of this active hurricane season. And don't forget, if you haven't caught my 2025 Hurricane Outlook, it's a link at the end of this video and a link down in the description down below. So if you haven't checked that out, I go over all the details of what I think is going to happen this hurricane season. Let's continue. All right, so looking at our upper air pattern here, there's that trough kicking out of the northeast, and then a ridge building in midweek. That's that big firecracker ridge here across the East Coast, eastern North America. You see that low moving out towards Newfoundland here, but we have a big ridge developing here in the Gulf of Alaska. That naturally means troughiness, usually along the U.S. East Coast here, and that's what's happening. I hate to say this, but every weekend we're getting major stormy, cooler conditions, rainy conditions across the East Coast here, Northeast in particular. Look at this trough. This is a massive negatively tilted trough across central and eastern North America come Tuesday, June 10th, and that kind of lifts up across north central Canada. Hopefully we can get some sort of rainfall up here for you. But unfortunately, this ridge along eastern North America means much less rain across parts of eastern Canada. We'll take a look at that in our rainfall amounts. But as we go through the middle part of the month, you can see much of North America getting into a ridge with a trough here along the Pacific Northwest into Northern California. And if we take a look at the MJO index, this is where things get a little interesting. We're going to be propagating from phase 5 all the way over. It looks like models taking us to phase 7 and 8. That's going to be a much more active weather pattern, especially in eastern North America and the western Atlantic. And if we take a look at the NAO index here, yeah, we're neutral. We're going to be swinging slightly positive to neutral again by the middle of June. All right, so for Canada, let's see if we can get you some rain for this wildfire situation. Well, we will have some rainfall moving through parts of Ontario, Manitoba area through Monday. June 2nd here. So that's some good news. Unfortunately, look how dry it's getting out here, especially in the central prairies. Even British Columbia, we're only looking around the edges, the coastline. But this is good news in Ontario. Look at this. As we head into Tuesday into Wednesday, look at this frontal boundary spreading to the east. This should help spread at least some relief and hopefully some cooler temperatures behind it to battle some of these wildfires. But I have to make note here. Look at this. As we head through later in the week, unfortunately, the only shows in town are these areas. with the exception for the rest of the country that's looking just really bone dry here. So this is not good news. We do start to see this track, I think, extreme southern Ontario here, down where the major population centers are, from London to Toronto up to Ottawa. You should start to see some decent rainfall here. So that is some really good news up through New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and the rest of the Canadian Maritimes. Now, we do start to get towards June 8th. Look at this. We get a big old low here near Saskatchewan and Manitoba. That's going to draw up some moisture. That is going to be some really good news here to fight these wildfires. Unfortunately, some of this will come with lightning, and we don't need lightning. That's a big problem. Some of these storms could be strong to severe, produce damaging winds and lightning, which is not good for fanning the flames. But here we go. British Columbia, a little more showerier towards June 9th into June 10th. Ontario, up towards Hudson Bay, dealing with a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity here. Unfortunately, this frontal boundary does start to weaken as it moves into this area of high pressure to the east off the U.S. east coast of North America. So we will get a redevelopment of this low pressure towards June 11th and 12th across southern and central Quebec. So that is some good news. At least we got some relief. And look at this. There is some glimmers of hope out British Columbia and Alberta and the Rocky Mountains here. We may be seeing some shower and thunderstorm activity. And if we look at the liquid equivalent precipitation amounts here into Canada, look at this. Yeah, we're southeast Canada. Thankfully, this could help the wildfire situation here. Not every province is going to see a lot of rain. That's the problem, especially out west here where things are starting to die down. So wildfires, I think, are going to really get cranking up here, British Columbia, all the way through Alberta here. So this is not good. But look at this. All the way through the middle of June, we could have some areas approaching, say, 60 to as much as 100 millimeters, especially in these yellower zones here. Extreme southern Ontario down towards Toronto, down towards London, you could be approaching 150 millimeters. So that's great news. But these other areas that are less than these purple zones, yeah, I'm a little worried for you because you definitely need the rain up here. Look at New Brunswick as well, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island up to Newfoundland. Lots of moisture as well. All right, so temperatures here. This is going to be the big story this week. A major heat wave ensuing for this time of year, 90s all the way up to the upper Midwest here. You can see the 70s into parts of the Ohio Valley and Northeast. Watch how quickly these fill in with upper 80s here as this warmth surges to the east. You can see from the Gulf Coast all the way up into parts of the Ohio Valley and Northeast. We'll be cracking 90 degrees and many of those usual warmer locations. And into Thursday, you can see out ahead of the I-95 corridor, all the way up from the Carolinas up into eastern New England, getting into the lower 90s. Friday, that pushes to the East Coast. And look at this. We get much more temperate conditions behind it into the 70s. And watch this as we head on into next Saturday. You can see temperatures pretty much boiling across the south and parts of the mid-Atlantic, but much more temperate to the north into the 70s. Extended forecast for my hometown viewers, Binghamton to Scranton, Upper Susquehanna, River Valley, New York, and Pennsylvania. If we look through Monday through Friday here, yeah, now that it's not the weekend, it's going to get sunny and nice. Mid-70s for Monday. Tuesday, the heat building, mid to upper 80s. And Wednesday, we will be cracking 90 degrees. Upper 80s Thursday with partly sunny skies. Into Friday, the rain moves in. You guessed it, just in time for next weekend. Plenty more weather to come. Here is a look at my affiliate. Check out these awesome, amazing maps. I am proud to announce that I am now an affiliate with Trilogy Maps. TrilogyMaps.com, bringing you the most digital, customizable maps found nowhere else on the internet. These maps are simply stunning. It's an advanced layering system that makes these maps great for making forecast maps with ease or any other maps that you would like to display important information on. The resolution on these maps is simply amazing. From the detail of everything here in the States, and you can also create stunning, digital, professional layered maps from also across the entire world. And don't forget, in checkout, the discount code option, use my code, MeteoMark, hit apply, and you will get 20% off your order. So if you want the most professional, customizable, and affordable weather maps found nowhere else on the internet, look no further than TrilogyMaps.com. Link in the description down below along with your discount code. As always, thank you for joining me for this edition of MeteoMark's Weather. Also, don't forget to join me on Facebook at MeteoMark, also Weather Northeastern, also Twitter at Weather Eastern. Don't forget it's MeteoMark.com, and don't forget, if you want to send me a coffee, there is a link, Super Thanks. You can smash that Super Thanks button, or my PayPal link in the description down below. You can buy me a cup of coffee. Thanks everyone, share that video, subscribe if you haven't, smash that like button.